Fans of a Horus heresy, molecular bonding studs, and seam-free finishers. Thank you very much for joining me for a build technique video. It's been a while since I've done something like this. Quite some time, I think. I hope you're all well. And what we're doing today is we're going to talk about one of the most common conundrums I hear people talking about with reference to some of the new Horus Heresy infantry figures, and specifically the Mark VI Marines in Corvus plate. So that's the assault squad and the tactical squad. And here we have such a completed model. These are very fine models, lots of good detailing, modern construction, modern proportions. There's lots to like. However, there's one thing that I think has caused quite a few people some consternation, and that is this. It's the Trooper's Left Pauldron and how to build it. So you won't really see what the issue is here, but of course this is supplied in two halves split down the middle. There's a very good reason for that, and this is what they look like on the sprue. This is one of the Assault Squad Marine sprues. I've not got any Tactical Marine sprues because I've built them all. That's how they come, and this is how we want them to end up looking. But that raises a question, well, how do you put them together? And I've seen a lot of questions, comments, and some frustration over how to do this. So I thought I'd do a quick video where I talk about my particular approach to assembling these. No better way to do that than a live demonstration. So we'll pop this little trooper down over there and let's take a look at the parts in question. So each pad is made up of two components like that. A left and a right hand side piece, and oh gosh, dexterity time here. There we go, and it's split like that, and it's got quite a sophisticated interlocking set of nubs and ridges, and that is going to go like so. But you can see that there's a seam. How do we go from this to this? And that's what I'm going to show you today. It's quite a simple process, I think. All you're going to need is a few tools, which we'll look at in a moment, a bit of equipment. You'll need some time and a bit of patience, but fundamentally this is not a difficult process, and we're going to exploit the properties of the polystyrene plastic these kits are made from and liquid polystyrene cement, and how it depolymerizes the plastic to stick it together. So let's talk about tools. So firstly, glue, because glue is the key thing here, and you're going to need two types of glue. First is something like this. This is Revell's Contact Professional. This is a standard liquid poly cement. So it's reasonably liquid. It has a bit of viscosity to it, so it's not thin like water, but it's not a thick gloopy cement like days of old. Anyone who built kits back in the 80s and 90s might remember that stuff. And then you'll also need something like this. This is Tamiya Extra Thin Cement. So this is of a consistency like water, as you can see. There's lots of products like this and this on the market. You can also use Tamiya Airbrush Cleaner, which is basically the same chemical composition as this if you can get hold of it. Hint, it's a lot cheaper buying one of those than these all the time. And these two working together is the trick to this. Now we're going to need two other tools. We're going to need a hobby knife or scalpel, like so. And then we're going to need a needle file, and I prefer this type for this job. It's flat on the underside, rounded on the top, and tapers to a point. This is going to go in two phases. We're going to do phase one now, and we'll come back and do phase two tomorrow. So we don't need those. And in phase one, we'll be using two types of polystyrene cement. So before we get into it, so this is just my way of doing it. There are other ways of doing this, I'm sure, and I'm not necessarily saying this is the best way, but what I am showing you is a way of getting seam-free finishes on these pauldrons. And I like to think this is a fairly simple process, and it uses tools and equipment that I have anyway. I'm not buying any specialist equipment here, so it just fits within my normal tools and hobby expenses sundry, so it's nice and economical, I think, as well. Right. Let me talk you through what we're going to do. So I'll just bob those two in the background. So we're going to take the liquid poly, and we're going to carefully run a bead or a line of glue down one half. Yeah. So you can use either half. I'm going to hold this half, and that's because I'm left-handed. Depending on your handedness, you can use either. We're going to put that glue on, then we're going to take the two parts and press them together. I'm going to locate them and press them together like so. Then I'm going to place it on this surface, Without touching the centre seam, I'm going to push them together really hard. So what happens is the liquid polystyrene cement will depolymerize a small amount of polystyrene on the seam joint, so it becomes like a liquid goop. Pushing it together will then force this liquid material up, and it will create like an overflow. It'll be like a ridge or a slight bumpy, gloopy bit. What that does is it fills that tiny little seam between the two. So we're going to do that. And then once we do that, we're going to quickly get the extra thin cement. We're going to take the brush. We're going to very quickly just paint that raised seam over and flat and remove any excess glue. So what we're doing in one step here is sticking the pad together, we're creating that filler, and then we're smoothing it off. So that's the first step. The second step is we'll come back to it the next day and we'll use a knife and a file just to smooth that down, and then run a final layer of extra thin over it, and then it'll be done. And we will end up with something like that. So I've done, how many I've done now? I've done over 80 of these. I'm doing one just for purposes of a demo. I normally do these in great big batches. I find the more I do at one time, the better. You can adjust this to your particular favorite preference, but I tend to find at least do the number of the squad that you're going to work on. So first step, the challenge here is getting everything in shot. There we go. So we've got my nice bead of glue there. You can see that being fairly generous, and that's okay because we're going to smooth this off. And then I'm going to take two pieces, locate them, and now they're pushed together. And carefully manipulating it, remember not touching the center, put it down on there and push it hard. So let's zoom in. I'm going to turn it around. Just pressing that together nice and hard, really giving it a good press. And that's why I put it down on this board. A good old press, and you can see now how we've got this raised ridge, and that's exactly what I said we'd have. Now we've got the extra thin. The one sort of challenge here is the dexterity of not touching the center bit. I normally do these flat on the table, but because we're doing a demo, I need to get it close to the camera so you can see what's going on. Just make sure you don't put too much glue on the brush at any one time, yeah? So otherwise it'll swamp the shoulder pad, and then you'll get it on your fingers, and then you'll find you just create a great fingerprint piece of art on your plastic shoulder pad. You can see how I've just worked over it, and I'm just going to do this bit at the end. Don't worry too much about these ends, so we're going to file those flat later. And there we go, and already we can see that we've got a nice, clean, smooth joint. When it dries, there might be a bit of contraction, but don't worry about that, because when we come back with the knife and the file, that will sort out. There you go, that's the end of the first phase. And here we are back again. It's the next morning, more or less, so overnight. Let's take a look at our pauldron. So it's nice and set now. You can see that it's fairly smooth, but there is still a bit of a ridge. So this is where our tools come in. So firstly, I'm going to deal with the top and bottom seam. So what I'm going to do is just file those down a bit using the flat side of the needle file. And what we should find is we get a nice smooth finish, and running my finger over that, that feels nice and smooth. A little bit more to do at the top there. That'll do. Now I'm going to take my knife and just work over that thin little ridge, which the light is just about catching. What we're doing here is we're just smoothing the plastic that weld up when we put the pressure on the two parts. We're just smoothing that down. And we're also pushing small burrs into the gap, any remaining gap, and that will become clear what the benefit of that is when we run the final bit of liquid poly over this. Hopefully you can see this okay. I'm kind of working around the camera, which is an interesting experience while trying to keep it centered. No doubt I'll fix what you can't see in post as best I can. Right, so smoothed it now. I'm going to take it extra thin. I'm going to remove the excess. So I've got a sensible amount of glue on here. And we're just going to go over it, over that line we've smoothed one final time. And there we go. One seam-free, smoothly joined Mark VI pauldron. It's not a difficult process, and you can repeat this again and again and again. And if we just take a look at a few of my Mark VIs, you know, we can get a look at it being repeated over and over. Do like the rotor cannons. Well, they look cool. They're actually quite useful in game now as well in the new edition of Heresy. And there you have it. It just takes a little bit of time, a little bit of patience, but you know, fairly basic tools, and you're not buying anything that you wouldn't probably already be using if you're building plastic models. I mean, these two types of glue, I use those all the time in conjunction when working on plastics. I'm not buying anything extra to do this process. So there you have it, my guide to getting seam-free Mark VI studded pauldrons. I hope you've enjoyed this and found it a useful demonstration. As always, please do share your thoughts and observations in the comments section. I'll be interested to hear those. Have you got a particular technique as well that you use? I'll be interested to know, how do you do it? You know, share that as well, so all the viewers share some ideas and compare different techniques. And always interesting to see who's approached the same problem in different ways. But other than that, I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching. I'll speak to you next time, and goodbye.